Hey, I get started again. Maker's Corner here again. Yeah, been working on this next level, which is the some kind of a console UI to user interface to control the experiments running on the heat transfer experiment box, and I decided I would use Python to make that because Python's quite generally used. But then I just suddenly ran into most of the problems that exist with yeah, open source software, and yeah, there are some. This, I mean, one of the big problems is you have lots of choices. It's also considered a benefit. There is no specific version that you should target, or no specific hard versioning control and libraries and stuff. So yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make a video about how do you survive and get a good start with Python, so that it won't feel so difficult. So number one is that if you already have Python on your computer, and it doesn't matter if it's Windows or Linux or whatever, or Mac, often comes up. You need to know what version of Python you're using, because there's two major lines of Python. There's what I call the major version 2 series, which is like 2.7, 2.8 stuff, and then there's the version number 3, like 3.5, 3.6 series. And it's really important from the start and get go what version you're running. And also then, if you intend to install Python, there's a transition period been going on for quite a long time now, but I think that one should get on to the major version 3 version. So I would suggest installing something like anything newer than 3.5 as the base Python installer. This of course is important due to the fact that there are some differences between those major versions. And now we can discuss about example code that one finds on the internet, because you need to, and this is often one thing that is very often not given in the description on the internet. Some people write it and clearly describe this, but I mean, you need to know what version of Python is this code for, the major version, and also the libraries. What's the version of and this is completely out of control when it comes to most of the open source. For an end user beginner, it's very, very hard to know what version of the library is the one that should be used. And most of the time they just use the libraries in the example code without any reference to, like, say, okay, this feature we're using is only supported in a specific version. Also, when one uses libraries, one can find lots of different examples that sometimes people use libraries that are like one-off solutions. They will never exist in the future. So it's sad to build code that is that will be dependent on a library that really has no future, that won't be updated and maintained with any level of reliability. So try and stay away from those kind of one-off implementations. And I bumped into one of those, and that's the asynchronous library for zero communication. That it's still in development mode. I mean, it'll probably come someday, but you don't want to build a solution based on it if it's still being changed. Also, one of the, which is typical to open source, that try not to download binaries or even large chunks of source packages from unknown sources, because you actually don't know what they contain. So if somebody says, oh, this is the world's most fantastic example, click on this obscure link and download this binary and run it. Yeah, don't do that. Not a good idea. So try and stay away from I mean, it's very difficult to know what is a good source, but you get to learn that after a while. And the good thing is to when you're doing these searches, to compare articles in different locations. And if there's like quite a few people using it from different trusted forums, then one can basically be sure that okay, it's a reasonable risk to use. And then one of the things with code examples is that I've got into this problem many times, that examples are sometimes like put into an editor and then copy pasted into whatever forum or something. And this can really wreak havoc with capitalization, because sometimes they copy paste them through text editing software that actually identifies words and changes capitalizations. So then you suddenly go, oh, it can't import a specific module because the name's not recognized. So just be a bit careful that sometimes names and some keywords can get destroyed by careless usage of text editors when copy pasting the data into the forums. And then the biggest one, which is something one really needs to be aware of. But if you have code snippets that are not Python version snapped, then you don't know if they're for major version 2 or major version 3. So what will happen is that if you take a major version 2 piece of software, source code, and try and use it in 3x, you will get subtle failures often because of the small irritating. Actually, they make quite a few irritating changes, not only in the base language rules and regulations, but they've also changed. At the same time, people got excited about, okay, let's clean up these libraries and change all the import names. And so when you take this 2.0 code and you try and use it in 3x, and you don't actually know if it's for 3x or 2x, then you're going to get often the most annoying failures, the typing inference failures, where the code will run through a certain part of it and then it will fail somewhere internal due to this, the way the Python runtime identifies the type of the variable being used. And then there are some subtle code syntax differences, like the print statement. Oh my god, why did they change the print statement? Make you cry. Millions of developer hours that have to be spent on fixing that crap. It's awful. And especially if you're a beginner, it can be quite daunting. Also, when you're looking for examples, try and steer away from bloatware examples. I mean, it's people trying to, I don't know, they have either copy pasted from a larger context, or they're trying to show the world how geniuses they are at writing Python code. So they actually they include what you are asking for, and then they pack it with a huge amount of extra code that actually is just bloatware. It has nothing to do with the problem you're trying to solve. So just move on to the next example. Try and stick with the examples that are very specific to the problem that you're trying to solve. And not these sort of like, oh, here's my whole program, try and figure it out. Yeah. And it is a bit sad when people are trying to help beginners in forums that they try and kill them off by coming in as a black belt developer and making excruciatingly encoded solutions for people's problems. Because that really, I think that kills motivation from a beginner. A beginner, I just want to do some Python, I want to do some simple stuff, and then some black belt guy comes in, well, here's like, 50 lines of the most complicated code ever developed. And then the developer, the beginner says, I can't handle this, I don't understand 90% of this. And then they just give up and go home. Yeah, and then when it comes to like running and editing Python, there are, for good or worse, there are huge amounts of both pure editors and development platforms to run Python in. But I do suggest that if you're a beginner, then start with a simple editor, the simplest one you can find, which suits your likes. Because if you go to an integrated development environment and you have like 50,000 menus and lots of like imported stuff and project templates and stuff, then you will tire and give up, because the only often the main thing you want to do is, I want to write this code, I want to create this function, I don't want to once you learn something about Python and what's around it, then you can move on to more complicated or a better solution. Anyway, I would it's just my hopefully good warnings. So if you do the same process that I'm doing now, because I'm not a hacker in Python, I just use Python to solve my problems, and I think it's very good at solving problems. It's just that I have, again, when I go through the Python process, I actually meet these same problems. So I just thought I'd give it out to the community and say, okay, if you're using Python, just be aware of these issues, and it'll maybe help somebody from not getting, or help somebody not to get stuck. I was just thinking I could actually show the code I'm working on. Whoops, now of course it doesn't work because I have the, I wonder how this would be better to show. No, but I can probably, let's see if I disable that line. And then we run it. Let's see what we get. I just want this to work so I can show. So I'm just going to hack it so that it actually does work. Something like that should work. Yes. So I fixed it. Anyway, this is coming back to the So I wanted to read the traffic, the messages coming from the Arduino over the serial port, and obviously Python has a serial library, and the first thing I run into is that the serial library that comes with Python is not asynchronous. So basically, when you're running a user interface like this one here, where you have functions, you can't. It's no native method to run it concurrently in parallel with the Python code. So there, as I said, there is a library in development to do this, but it's categorized as under development, so I didn't want to use that. And then I found a piece of code on the net which looked very easy to use. So here's the standard serial library, so that's nothing magical. And you basically say serial port and baud rate, and then you have a serial port object, and then this is just placeholders to get the UI built. And then this example is based on the idea of running timers. So basically, we could actually move this code out of here. So it shouldn't actually be there. It's not logical. I wonder where I should park it. Could actually park it maybe here. Some people put functions at the beginning of Python, and some people put it at the end for the main. So that's better. So let's see, this should also work. Yep. So here we see the main code starts here. And that was the same serial port setup. And then basically it says this is the actual window. So it inserts a timer function into the window, which says after 100 milliseconds execute read serial. And then it comes into read serial, and this tries to read the serial port, checks if there's something to read, and then it goes and puts the value in the buffer. And this is beautiful, nice code, no problem. So in this example, no comment about what version of Python this is for, no comment on what version of the serial library this is for. And now I'm going to where did I get that error? Invalid command name. Yeah, that's even more problems than. Oh, well, no, it doesn't come up that text. I thought that text didn't look very familiar. I haven't seen it before. Anyway, without getting bogged down, so this is a typical example. So I found this example. There's no comment about what Python version this is for. There's no comment on what serial library version this is for, and then I will just restore the original code. So we'll just put it back here. So anybody who's done a bit of programming, I'm sorry if it's not that complicated. I mean, it reads a character and checks if it's an end-of-line character, and if it isn't, then it inserts it in it adds it to the serial buffer. And this is where it gets interesting, because crash. And this is this type inference problem that you get very often in Python when you copy paste code that's for major version 2, and then you try and run it basically with the same library in the 3x series, and then you get an internal failure. Like here must be string, not bytes. So the author of these libraries has created a different return type that works, and this is where it gets so aggravatingly stupid. That these type inference errors, they will work for the most of the logic. Like see how much it survived, and then it crashes in something like this. And when you're using bigger source code sources, like many levels of depth, then you get these crashes in somewhere in the line 1500, somewhere internally in some magic logic that you have absolutely no clue about. So it is very important to know what versions are to be used, and this is one problem I think that open source has, that this is not easy to handle. There are many attempts to do that in very many package management systems and stuff, but yeah. So it's the good thing that everything's free and you can use whatever you want, and there's a lot available, but then it is up to you basically, as I said, it has the end user to actually find out what works and what doesn't. But I think I'll get this to work. This is just to check up the on the 3x serial library, find out what the return type is, and then address this issue here. And then it will work. Then I was just thinking, then I will just hack this back so that I can actually run it. No, wait, the window opens actually, so I can actually. Let's see. There. So this white area, that's actually a terminal. So I will actually print out the data coming. So now the experiment is running by default. So yeah, because it was running from yesterday. So I started using the Arduino console. But I'm going to add the buttons like execute, the button execute and shut down and stuff. And then I'll have the serial output here, and then we'll have some data capture and stuff. So I think it will probably work okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, when it comes to editors, this is the Mu editor. This is by far one of the simplest editors. I use the idle interface, I use Visual Studio IDE, I use many different tools, but it does depend on what is the complexity level of the thing that I'm trying to do. So I switch between different platforms based on the complexity of the project and solution that I'm trying to work on. So for the more simpler things that are going to be like, you know, 1 or 2 files for hacking hobbies, then I want to stay away from those the more complicated IDEs, because it's just way too much work to understand, and you get so much overhead, and they are also functionally much slower. So with these small user interface solutions, you can do things much faster than what you can with those larger development platform user interface. So that was my rant about. Oh yeah, this user interface here. Oh, that I need to bring up also. If you want to build UI components for, Python semi doesn't have a built-in mechanism for building UIs. If you the closest you can get is tkinter, which is the one I use. So this could be considered like the default UI development environment, but there's Qt library. If you search on the internet, you will find many different solutions for creating, so that you can use the Python code to create user interface. There are also, when you get to bigger, more complicated integrated development platforms, that you can actually graphically define the user interface, so you don't have to actually program it. And I suggest that for larger projects, it's a bit meaningless to actually code the UI with, like here I've done the actual programming, so set up the window and define the window font, and then define the button and console all in code. This you can do graphically in many, in any day, and then it will auto-generate the code in the back. So it's a bit of a like, what UI framework you're going to use is a little bit dependent on what is your objective. If your objective is just to do something small and quick, then TK works fine, and TK has a very long history. So if you're looking for lots of stable examples on the internet, then basically if you stick to TK, you're quite safe. Even if this has also suffered from the same 2x, 3x syndrome, but you need to know what version it's meant for. Oh, is there anything else now? Or have I ranted enough? Yeah. No, so it's not all positive, all roses. On the other hand, I do think this is using Python is a little bit more. It has its benefits. One of the benefits is that if you want to run this on Linux or on a Mac, pretty much the code will run directly. Yeah, except for how you define the serial port address, but that's peanuts. But I mean, the rest of the code will just run. And also, it's very lightweight, so you have text file-based source code management, and yeah, and it's pretty universal. I mean, when you get into, of course, you can build this application in many different development platforms. But I mean, if you go for the bigger ones, then you have to do integrated development environments and lots of other stuff. So. I think it's good enough for. Plus, the thing is that Python has an endless library. It might actually work with some of us in an endless library for statistics, mathematics, plotting. So we might actually make some of those also for this solution, just as a fun thing. Okay, so that's enough. Ranting for now. I don't think this source code is that useful. It's got a few tricks that I found. It's how to read the serial port using a timer. Is there any other tricks I found? How to make the fonts, to define a font and a style, so that you can actually get a reasonably sized font, because at least on Windows, when you run this, the default size of the fonts is very small. So then it's good to be able to resize it. Otherwise, I don't think otherwise this has no real super duper value. So what I'll do is I'll continue like this. Part of when we're doing this software development, because it can be quite boring if I go through the code details. So I will. I think from time to time I'll come back and highlight some interesting areas, like I did now with how do you start up with Python, and can also highlight some specific solutions. And then if somebody, as again I said, if somebody really wants this code, I can create a GitHub entry for this. But I mean, I think that. This is not kind of logic that is that complicated to create even from scratch. So if I show the kind of like how do you solve specific interesting problems, then the rest can be done by anybody out there. That's actually the nice thing with Python. For most of it, then it's pretty much anybody can do it. Okay, so I think that we can call that a day for now. Okay. Well, I'll come back when I have more to post, or more to rant about. Oops.